To the market proposal. Hello, good morning, and welcome to SIRA Talks. I'm Rashmi Chanduraj, one of the co-founders of SIRA, and I'm so glad you're all here this Saturday morning. SIRA is a women's only space for learning, growth, and having those real conversations. You know, after nearly 25 years of corporate and consulting experience, I realized that while we have access to like professional development, what we often lack is, the safe circle where we can like reflect, reset, and rise together. And that's exactly what this session, this session matters. We are actually going to talk about resilience. This is a word that, we hear all the time, but for so many women, especially I feel like in India, it's really about surviving, not really thriving. No one really teaches us, right? Like how to, process setbacks, how to reframe like failures, how to, reinvent ourselves, and how to sort of shift our mindset when, we're feeling like stuck and have nowhere to go. Deepa and, I've had like many of these conversations before we really started SIRA. So I'd love for her to, share a little bit more.
Hi, Rashmi. Thank you, everyone. So I'm Deepa Shah, a graphic designer past 27 years. Me and Rashmi started this SIRA, not just to a place where we can share stories, but where we can shift our mindset and perceptions and grow. And not just individually, but collectively. Today, we'll deep dive into growth mindset and resilience. I believe that this is a tool that many women carry within them, but just don't tap into, in this demanding, world where so much is expected of us. Learning how to face challenges or setbacks and to live with intention is tools that are so powerful that we can carry.
That's right. And really guide us through like, today's sessions to talk about this is, someone who truly sort of embodies, what it means, right? To grow through what we go through. Cheryl Dutta. Cheryl's, journey is remarkable. She is a retired, helicopter pilot. And she's, one of the first helicopter pilots. She stepped into that role. A few women really, I think, had probably imagined, let alone attempted. Being, especially in like a male-dominated environment, having to adapt and thrive, is not really for the faint of heart. She went on to become like an entrepreneur. Today, she's, a transformational life coach, and currently working on sort of, blending mindset work with the expressive arts. She honestly, I feel like, doesn't just coach from like theory. She coaches from, having lived through these experiences, facing those transitions, burnout, probably self-doubt, and finding ways to move through them with grace and grit. Now, she obviously helps others do the same with clarity and compassion and courage. Cheryl, we are honored to have you with us.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you, Deepa. Those were really lofty, very kind words.
Oh.
And thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To kick us off, with this, I wanted to kind of dive in and, look at when you kind of, look back at your journey, especially those transitions, you've lived through from being a pilot to, an entrepreneur, and now a life coach, what did resilience, look like at, each of these stages?
Well, Rashmi, I come from a defense background, as in my father was in the defense services. And interestingly, I come from three generations of pilots. My grandfather was also a pilot, and he served, with the British Airways and then with the Indian Airways. So there is a certain legacy behind me joining the Air Force and then becoming a pilot. But I come from a really diverse background in terms of very culturally as well. So my mom is, as you know, she is a Christian, but she's also, her family is British. So we are very cross culturally, intertwined in this whole journey together. And I feel that a lot of what I am today is shaped by my childhood and what I did during that. So being in the defense forces, every second year or every third year was a move that was required from us, and we needed to change and move to an absolutely new, probably remote location where the only family that you actually had was that little bit of a community that you have over there. So we made new friends, new places, so there was a sort of adaptability and a sort of get with it that developed very early in life, especially for us. And so maybe at a really young age, it was always an adventure, for me. It was always really exciting that I'm going to a new place, I'm going to meet new friends, new school, what's it going to be like, and so you kind of learn to, adapt really quick to that environment. And I think that has served me well over the years because for the various transitions that I've had in my life, beginning with joining the Indian Air Force and then the constant maybe moves for the 12 years that I've served in the Defense Forces, and then transitioning out from there and coming into a totally sort of different environment of learning how to then live in a city like Mumbai, which can be really crazy, and beginning something entirely new. So for me, it was always a little bit of a need to sort of do the different, and I think I felt that I wanted to experience certain amount of change, certain amount of learning, certain growth, and that is what has carried me forward for a very long time. And I also need to say this, that being in the defense forces, especially, kind of gave me an exposure to a lot of, circumstances where I experienced a lot of things over there, being in the forces, things like a war, things like earthquake, things, flying for at 21,000 feet, where it's so remote and so the weather is so crazy that I don't know how those soldiers are living up there. But the very common thing that I saw amongst all these situations was, not just the devastation and not just the destruction and not just the aftermath of having gone through all these calamities, but I also saw a lot of human resilience, which I think every time that everybody needed to bounce back, it was just that one factor that I sort of saw amongst people was having resilience. And the way people just said, okay, yes, this has happened, but we need to get back. And that is what I felt that was the greatest lesson that I took from being in the defense forces, was that build resilience, as a skill. Because I think that's the number one factor that I think we all need today in our life, is a lot of just having a lot of resilience.
Yeah, no, that's great. Given that you already have like growing up, you already have that, were there patterns that you saw that, like a civilian, like for me, can take away, from that? Because obviously for us, like, I mean, I started school in kindergarten and, graduated in 10th grade. So that was one place, my circle of friends were the same. It was all the same set of people. My environment was the same. So what, and I'm sure there are other women who are also in the same sort of a place. What does, what does one do to build that sort of, that resilience sort of, in each stage of, of their sort of journey?
So I think especially for women, when we are talking about uh, the number, I feel what we really need to understand is that, don't let failures sort of define who you are as a person in terms of life will happen. You do go through so many transitions in life. And uh, looking at it from a little bit of a mindset where I'm not a fixed mindset. There are two things. There's a fixed mindset and then there's a growth mindset. So in a fixed mindset, you have certain beliefs, certain things that you hold on to, that, okay, these are the things that I believe in, and this is the way it's supposed to be done. And in my 20s, I need to be achieving this, and these are the milestones that I have. And so in my 30s, I should be doing this. So there are these certain, fixed ideas or beliefs that we live with. And I think that is something that actually stops you from growing. So if you really do want to sort of build resilience, you do want to see something happening in your life, I think it's very important to have a growth mindset. And it's very important to build that growth mindset. It doesn't come naturally. It's a skill that you do need to build.
That's great. That's really, powerful. For one, just seeing sort of those transitions that have happened for you, that's really powerful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheryl, that's an interesting, your story that you shared. Talking of resilience, that you were saying that you saw it as a common thread amongst so many people, during tough times. And there's this song that I remember every time you say resilience, by Billy Ocean, where, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. That's something that rings in my head, like every time, the word pops up. Yeah. While, it's easier said than done, especially when the times are hard and you have to stay strong.
Yeah.
Do you think resilience is something that you're born with or something that you build over time?
I think resilience is very important. You build it. It's a skill. It doesn't come to you naturally. It could come to you naturally also. For some people, it's just a way they are, it's where it is. But it is an important skill that you can build. And I think the idea of building that is that, like I said, the number one thing I think is to have a growth mindset. In how do you then build a growth mindset? What is a growth mindset? So a growth mindset in very simple terms is that the curiosity and the eagerness to be a learner in life. So I think it's very important to keep a mindset where you want to continuously learn something. And the moment that you feel that I don't need to learn, I know everything, that's where I think you need to re-examine where you're at, because you're probably either in a rut or you aren't really thinking out of the box or anything new. So a small example of when I left the Air Force, I wanted to start being an entrepreneur. I wanted to start something of my own. So I thought about, getting into fashion designing and styling, because that was also one of the things that I was very keen on. So I had no formal training in being a fashion designer, or what is it exactly that I need to do, no background in marketing either. So I built that business from scratch, and I kind of learned along the way. So, I learned what it means to deal with artisans. What does it mean to build a business from scratch? What's the marketing strategy? How do I approach people? I came from a very protected defense background. I didn't know how to deal with, people like in the industry, especially in the fashion industry. And so learning these things gave me a kind of a curve which went up. It wasn't a curve. And it isn't to say that there were no setbacks, there were no failures along the way. I mean, I failed probably miserably a lot of times. But to me, those failures weren't failures. To me, those failures were, it's okay, it's a setback. And this is a learning experience. And this is something I'm really passionate about. So I'm not, the end goal isn't that I need to be super successful. The end goal is that I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be in this business, and I'm going to learn about it. And I think that is what what is important to know that if you want to build resilience, you need to know that failures are not setbacks. Failures are just a stepping stone, you know. And if you haven't been able to achieve something, it's only because, you know, they say it's not that you can't do it. There's no in it. It's just that you haven't experienced it yet. So the word yet is very important. I haven't done this yet, but I'm going to do it. So that is the sort of, I think, the mindset that you want to develop. And
Right.
that's the difference between just surviving, you know, and then wanting to thrive. So
Right.
especially for women, I think the understanding is that I'm I'm doing this. I'm okay. I'm able to manage this. I'm a multitasker. I'm in this, you know, I'm doing XYZ. I'm at this position in my company. But are you learning? Are you growing? What is it that's giving you joy every day of your life? So I think that is something that you need to put into perspective, you know,
Right.
and that comes to the second thing that I wanted to talk about was the perspective. So do you
Right.
have the right perspective of looking at things? You know, and that is something that's very important in keeping in mind, especially when we go through so many transitions in life, you know, from motherhood to from being someone who comes out as a fresh graduate from college and, you know, with all those dreams in your head, and then you establish a career, and then you midway, you kind of maybe take a break to raise your kids. And somewhere along the way, menopause happens and, you know, life
Yeah.
goes on. So that is the perspective that you need to keep in mind, that
Right.
I am transitioning through this phase right now. This is just a change for me. And so I don't want to, you know, take it as a failure that I haven't done things in my life.
So, Cheryl, are there any like tools or rituals or framework that you work with on a daily basis to sort of, nurture this growth mindset or this resilience and all of that that you're speaking about? Is there
Yes.
something that you can do on a regular basis to strengthen it?
Yes. I think what the first thing that I said was that find your joy in life.
Mm-hmm.
Find the joy that you want every day when you want to do something in life. Is this giving me joy? Question it. Is this giving me happiness? Do I, when I'm sitting here and working on this, what do I feel? Am I passionate about it? I think when you feel passionate about something that you're doing, whether it's your work, whether it's your art, whether it's, you know, your business that you're in, if you are experiencing some sort of joy out of it, you're in the right place. You know, you're
Mm-hmm.
doing the right thing. So understand what gives me joy, not what
Okay.
gives others joy, or what is happening to other people in my life, but to me, you know, what is it that I feel joyful about every day? And I think another thing is to understand what are your core values and beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you a lot of us, you know, have these limited beliefs in life, especially when we come from societies, we come from a culture that is, you know, maybe patriarchal, maybe a culture that has constantly told us that this is what you're supposed to do, this is your belief, these are your beliefs. So question those beliefs. Don't be afraid to question them every single day. You know, does this belief serve me today in my life? It may have served you 20 years ago in your life, but does it serve me now? Is this belief true? Do I really want this? So question those beliefs in your life. Maybe, you know, ask yourself every day. So some of the maybe tools you could do is, I like what I do is I journal. You know, I like journaling, and I like doing a little self-reflection about myself. I may not get the time to do it every day, and maybe it's not possible to do it every day, but a check-in with yourself, maybe, you know, once in 2 weeks, once a month. Uh, what's my purpose? What's my mission? What's my statement? You know, what am I doing? What's the purpose that I want to serve over here? So maybe give yourself a purpose statement. You know, give yourself a sort of a tagline, a little mission statement in life. Okay, this is my purpose, and now what are my beliefs about it? Is it giving me joy? Where am I at the moment? You know, who am I surrounded by? And that comes to another very important thing in life, is to know your people. You know
To know your people.
Know your people, know who are the
People.
people that that have your back, who's the community that supports you. I think it's very important to understand that, you're not in an isolated bubble. You're not in a little world of your own. You live and work in a community. So what is that community around you? Who are those people that are with you and for you? And keep that community close. It's very important to, especially as women, that women support women, and
Right.
the way that we're doing this right now here on this talk,
Absolutely.
So we are giving you a support, a platform that you can probably build off. So
Right.
don't be afraid and don't be shy to take that support. Don't be shy to ask for that support if you really need it. So I think especially with women, we need to have mentors. We need to have people who can, if I'm in a certain industry and I need questions, I need to know things, I need to have someone who I can approach. So I need mentors in my life. I need those women friends. I need those women who I can call up and ask without hesitation. So build that community for yourself.
Right.
It's not going to come to you if, naturally. You have to build it.
Yeah.
It's
That
like they
aligns
say, right?
with
Like you enter.
SIRA. Yeah.
Sorry.
That
Yes.
aligns with SIRA so
Yes.
much. I mean, that's the whole reason why we're here. I mean, we're building that community. We're there to support each other. That's the whole purpose of,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
getting this platform together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rashmi, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that, I mean, you do end up being, like the sixth one or the fifth one, of the people that you surround yourself, with, right? So I think, that's definitely powerful to, to have that, intention to do it and be deliberate about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I know we kind of dabbled on this a little bit, but I think we want to dive a little deeper, into going into like what is mindset. Because honestly, like the word now is been thrown around, uh, in almost all walks of life. And I say that, because it's, in kids in school, all the way to, like entrepreneurs, and there are different kinds of mindset, right? People talk about, like financial mindset and, like all the other, mindsets that are there that I probably, won't even know. But, that said, I personally remember, moments in my own life, right? Like earlier on, especially when we were going through sort of big transitions where people would say, like, you just need to sort of change your mindset. And, I'm like, okay, like really what, if it was that easy, then, like, I guess everyone would be doing it and there was no need to say it. So Cheryl, what I want to understand is, like in your experience, what does like, the growth mindset really mean in real life, right? Not just saying it. I know you kind of talked about it, a little bit earlier, but can you elaborate on, what that is? How is that different from, staying positive, for example?
Yeah. So I would say I saw this lecture once from a professor, and the way she described it was that it's, you're at the starting point of knowledge, and it's like a messy, like a curve, like a sine curve, goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And the end is having that knowledge. Okay. So you start with no knowledge, and then you go with that messy curve up and down, up and down. And then you come to a point where you know about it. That's knowledge. So it's the same with a growth mindset or, building resilience and things like that. It's not about, that's not the end point. Resilience isn't that I have knowledge. I know what's a growth mindset. I know what it's all about. That's not what it is, right? It's about what's that messy curve looking like? Where is that curve going? Am I going up? Am I going down? Is it, it's all over the place. But what's happening in between is that you're learning. You're learning about something, you're building knowledge, you're building it. You started with no knowledge, but you are like on this path, on this journey, which is to learn something. And that is what mindset is. It's not about that, oh, have mindset, but hey, where's it going to come from? It's going to come from you learning about it, learning something, and when I say learning, it means understanding that today, what am I curious about? What do I want to learn about? Whether it's learning how to draw, whether it's learning an art form, whether it's learning something to do with your business, whether you want to say do a new course, or is it something that I need to upscale my skill? Okay, I'm at a maybe at a level where I'm the CEO of my company, but what do I need to learn right now? What am I not, what am I missing? And what am I curious about? And curiosity is at any age. Curiosity never dies, So that is something that you need to develop within you. That it's not about knowing what's a growth mindset, that these are the boxes that I'm ticking. Okay, do I have a growth mindset? Yes. No, a growth mindset is actually continuously letting that curve go up and down, up and down, up and down. It's okay. It's going to be messy. It's going to be something that you're like, am I doing, what am I doing? What do I need to do? You're feeling frustrated about it. But it's good to feel frustrated. Being frustrated means that you're asking questions. You're thinking. You want to think. So you're using that part of your brain that actually needs to develop and learn something. And I think we all know, and we've all heard this in all the self-help books. People talk about neuroplasticity and, so many other things, epigenetics and all these things come up. But basically, what is all that? That is that, how do you retrain the brain? How do you keep that creative thing alive? So creativity doesn't just mean being into art or being into being an artistic person. That is not creativity. Creativity is allowing your brain to constantly develop, constantly learn something new. And I think that is what a growth mindset is. That you retrain your brain to constantly see something in a different way, in a new way, in a different perspective.
Yeah, no, I think, so true. But do you think that sometimes, maybe we make it, sound like too simple, when actually in reality, if you think about it, it takes so much of emotional work, right? It can be messy as well, like you pointed out, with just layers of emotion that's building, like, that's really hard work. How does, how do you deal with that?
I would say recognize what your signs are. Recognize the signs in your body. We talk about, oh, I'm so tired. I'm so, I'm mentally and emotionally tired. Am I experiencing a burnout? What am I experiencing? Is this burnout? I'm just like, nothing gives me joy anymore. I go to work, but it's not something that I really want to be there. I don't want to be around people. So recognize what is triggering you. What are those little triggers in your body? Your mind and your body is constantly giving you those little signs that, when you start procrastinating about doing things, when you avoid conflict, when you don't want to deal with issues. So these are little signs that something is telling you that you need to look at that. You need to examine that. You need to understand what is not working for me over here. And how do I need to reframe this narrative? So it's a narrative that we develop within ourselves, and we start believing in that narrative. So maybe when you do need to change and you do need a growth mindset, how do I then reframe this narrative that is there in my mind? So, and things like when you have irrational fears, when we think about, I don't think I'm capable of doing this. I don't think I'm meant to be here. These are some of the irrational sort of fears that we develop because based on what we are doing at that moment. that we are stuck, we feel stuck. So when you learn to recognize those things in yourself, your body, they look out for those. I say to women, look out for those little signs. The body knows best, I feel. When you are going through certain things in life, you do get those very subtle signs. Especially as women, we are, I think, very adept at masking those signs. We're very good at covering our tracks, so to speak. So,
Cheryl,
yeah.
how do you, once you've recognized these signs, what do you do with it? How do you sort of then
Yeah.
deal with it or navigate it?
So like I said earlier, that you need to re-examine where you're at certain points in your life and understand that, okay, I think something needs to change. And if something doesn't change, or if I don't move ahead, or if I don't, let this go, you need to re-examine these things that you have. Maybe the beliefs that you've developed, maybe certain, like I said, things that don't serve you anymore. What probably served you in earlier on in your life, maybe in your teens or your 20s or your 30s, doesn't serve you in your 40s and your 50s. So how do I then, move ahead and leave these beliefs behind? And I think that is very important to understand, that I need to leave certain amount of baggage or things that I'm carrying and move forward. And for that, what do I need to do? Maybe you need to read something. Maybe you need to read some self-help books. Maybe you need to take a course. Maybe you want to just sit and re-examine your goals in your life, So it's also very easy to say this, that you do it, but you are in a family, you are in a society that is constantly telling you otherwise. So I think you have to be aware that, yes, I am in a certain cultural and social environment, but I also have to accept change.
So you're saying internalize the whole thing, and
it is internal. It is always internal.
Okay, and you come up with the answers that best suit you. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And it's nobody else would be able to do this for you better than yourself.
Right.
And why? And that is the reason why when you do have a certain amount of resilience, and you have a little bit of, you learn to build adaptability into your life, that, okay, come what may, when things change around me, the picture, I know what I want in life. I know what I need to be doing to get myself back onto that platform, or onto that track that I need to be on. And I think this is not something that happens in a one-off, it's not a one-off thing that happens in your life. It's something that you constantly learn to have in your life, in terms of whether you're in whatever phase of life you're at, whether you're in a homemaker going back to a job, or you want to, maybe go back to school and study something or something like that. Understand that, what's my why? Why am I here? What am I doing? That, that certain amount of self-belief.
Yeah. So what you're saying is become a lifelong learner and
Yes.
internalize and keep questioning yourself at every point, questioning your beliefs as well. So you're actually, in a way, setting goals at every stage in your life. Is that right?
I wouldn't say question, because when you're questioning, you're putting in self-doubt as well.
Okay.
So I would say, I don't like the word to question yourself, because then you're doubting yourself. Am I doing the right things? I'm a questioning. So it's not about questioning yourself. It's about just re-examining. What are my core values and beliefs at this point in my life? And do I need to maybe I need to change them. Maybe I need to let go of something. Maybe I need to add something in. So what are those core values and beliefs? What is that purpose that you have at that point in your life?
Right.
And that could look very different from what it looked like 15 years ago or 20 years ago in your life.
Absolutely. And this is something you recommend that we journal on a daily basis or regularly to sort of get these.
If you're a journaling person, if you're a writing person, yes, why not? If you're an art, if you like doing art, if you're an artist, just put it out there, put it into a painting, do something, make a collage, whatever excites you, you know. Or
Yeah.
I don't know, create a mandala maybe of your life, or create sort of like a vision board if you enjoy doing those kind of things. And I would say, don't not talk about it, don't not look at it. So whether it's even I would say just maintaining a very small thing of doing a gratitude journal. There is so much in life to be just grateful for. And we don't realize that. So I would say, even if you don't even have 5 minutes in the day to pen down 3 things that you're grateful for, just say to yourself that I'm grateful for X, Y, Z in my life today. And that itself, I mean, it just changes the way you think, because you wonder, okay, everything isn't so bad. Everything isn't so down, you know. I do have certain things in life that I'm grateful for. And that is a practice that, yes, you can adopt into your life. And I think another thing is mindfulness. We're all, mindfulness is another word that is just, you know, thrown around these days in all talks and things like that. But what exactly is mindfulness? Mindfulness is basically you and I sitting here in this very moment and actually taking in what we're talking about, actually understanding that I'm not thinking about where I'm to be, you know, after I finish this webinar, and I'm not thinking about what happened prior to this, but I'm here in the moment, you know, actually truly taking in what you have to say. So that is mindfulness. And it's not easy to do. It's we think it's easy, but it's not, because you need to be present in that moment, and you can't do it all the time. It's difficult. But if you do understand that if I'm mindful about everything that I am in my life, even for a little bit of time, that's good enough.
Yeah. Cheryl, you know, you were mentioning about reading some books earlier on to sort of continue the learning.
One of the very nice books that I've read is this person called, it's a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. And I think she has particularly written this book for women, and to read and understand what we are talking about today. What is a growth mindset? What is resilience? What is adaptability? And that's a good book to, if you want to get a hold of that. And there's another book which is it's an old book. It's not a recent book. It's called Women Who Run with the Wolves. It's a book which is written by a lady called Clarissa Pinkola, I think. And so it's basically stories of women archetypes, you know, women from different cultures, women from different indigenous backgrounds. And it's about how we create these archetypes for women, you know, the nurturer, the survivor, the mother, the, you know, the so there are these certain archetypes that we have for women, you know, the savior, or whatever that may be. So we've got these archetypes in various cultures and various, you know, even in our in India, we have these archetypes of women, Durga and things like that. So how do you bring the consciousness of that, you break that archetype? How do you break that archetype that we've given women, you know? So how do you create consciousness in you and with others about what's the essence of a woman? How do you get back to your own true essence? So that's what the book is about. It's a beautiful book. It's a bit difficult to read, but it's a really nice book. And then there's another one.
Sorry, what was that name,
Sorry.
Cheryl? I didn't quite catch that.
It's called, the book is Women Who Run with the Wolves.
With the wolves, okay.
Yeah. It's written by this lady called Clarissa Pinkola.
Okay. Awesome. I'm, I haven't even heard of it. So definitely something that I'm
Yeah,
going to
it's an
add to
old
my
book.
list.
It's not a new one, and it gets a little. You have to actually sit with it and read it. It's a little tough
Sounds
one.
interesting. Yeah.
There's another one called The Mountain Is You. It's by an author called
Mountain as
Brianna
You.
West. The Mountain Is You.
Oh,
Something.
yeah.
And another book that I really love, and I think that's not just for women, but for anyone, is a book called The Body Keeps Score. And it's by a person called Basil Vander Pork. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name right, but the book is called The Body Keeps Score.
Wow, I have
And
a lot of reading to do.
yeah, and this is what I was talking about earlier about our body understanding who and what we are, and whatever we go through in life, whether it's trauma inflicted or it's experiences that we have in life, it's our body understands it and it keeps score. It gives you those signs in life. It gives you those little subtle things that maybe you miss it, but it's there. It keeps score, and that's what the book is about. And how do we learn how to look for those signs?
Wow. Okay. Well,
Like,
thanks, Rashmi, for putting it out in the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
yeah. Sorry, I hopefully I got it right. Most of them, but yeah, no, that's great. Like I said, definitely need to add a lot of these, to my reading log.
Yeah.
But I want to actually go back and talk about something which we touched on maybe a tad bit earlier. When we talked about mindset, obviously mindset, we can't really talk about without sort of talking about burnout, right? Because I feel like it's probably the most, impactful or essential or whatever when we're going through burnout. And if you're actually, are honest, sometimes, like you can't tell. I mean, depending on what phase you're at, you can't tell whether you're just like exhausted or burnt out. And I can speak to, that just being in corporate and doing whatever I did between, running a house, having kids, trying to, do that, traveling, having a team that you're responsible for, and everything else with, others. I'm sure I've met other entrepreneurs who are running multiple businesses, and, that said, how can women tell when, they're not just tired, but actually like mentally burnt out?
Let me ask this question back to you, as in, have you ever experienced burnout?
I
What did
didn't
it
know
feel
what
like?
burnout was.
What did it feel like to you in your body?
That's a good question. Like just exhaustion. And in all honesty, it's funny that you ask that, because I'll be vulnerable here. And I remember going to my physician and she's like, well, you don't look right. And she's like, here in the US, you fill out a form and they actually review it, and they kind of I suppose evaluate whether you're mentally sound, meaning that you're not like depressed or whatever. And and she's like, you don't look right. I was like, no, I'm just traveling and whatever. And after filling that out, she's like, oh, maybe you're like depressed. I'm like, what? But you know what I mean? Like and it's likely that I was. I can't tell. But it was also a time where I had to go back and sort of say, okay, well, is this just me being tired, or do I sort of reassess where I'm at, right? So that's a really good question. But and therefore, like this particular one, how do you know as a woman who's working and doing everything else that we do, how do you know that you're not just tired and it's actually something else? I mean, one of the things it seems like you're pointing out is your body will tell you.
Yeah. So when you use the word reassess, so when you are reassessing things and you know inherently and intuitively that something isn't right for me, and I am not happy getting up in the morning and wearing my work clothes and going to work. I'm not happy sitting on this table every day of my life. And what needs to change for me? And when you're asking that question to yourself, what needs to change? Why am I feeling different today? Why, I didn't feel like this maybe 5 years ago. Why
Yeah.
am I asking myself these questions today? Why can't I just, why do I just want to get out of here? Why do I need to just get out of this space? So those are the things that you're asking yourself. Then that's where the reassessing, that's where the reframing comes in. That what needs to change for me? And it doesn't have to be a massive, for some people it is a massive change. For some people it's like, I need to give this up right now and I need to be moving on and doing something else. I don't know right now what is that something else, but it's okay, because I know that this is not what I want for sure. And that in every single space of your life, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your work, whether it's something that you've taken up and you're not really happy about, whether it's your business, that something needs to change. And when you're asking that question, and it doesn't have to be a massive leap, it can be just a tiny baby step that you take today towards changing that perspective, changing that narrative. So it's just that much, that's all. And you understand that it's not just tiredness now. I'm not tired because I've had a good sleep. I've taken care of myself. And my body is rested. I'm not tired.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, that's definitely powerful. And, it was also my pivot. So I do thank my doctor for that. Um, because had it not been her pointing it out, I probably would not have gone back and said, I mean, and reassessed like where I was at, but I'm sure there are others who are in the same position, and hopefully they'll be able to, take away something. But in terms of, like I mean, obviously for me, there was an incident or an event that triggered that questioning. I wanted to, also see, like, are there other, like mindset sort of shifts or whatever that, that people can kind of look out for? Or is there sort of a mantra or, something that, or a simple tool that, they can basically adapt to sort of reassess at that stage, right? Because a lot of them, including me at that time, didn't know that I was actually in that position.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say a mantra as in one size fits all. There is no one mantra for that you can just throw across the board and say, use this mantra, this is the magic one. It's not that way. So when we're talking about mantras, and it's like what works for me, what works for me is, I can tell you that what works for me is that knowing that when I want something in my life, I really, really want something in my life, the universe will make that happen for me. The shifts will happen. And I just need to be able to take that leap of faith. That is the mantra that works for me, but it may not work for someone else. So when I talk about having a purpose or a mission statement, it's not in a very, I'm saying it in a very military way, have a mission statement. But when I say that, what I mean is know your purpose. Understand at the end of the day, what is your purpose in life? And it's not easy to figure it all out in one go. It's an ongoing journey, but understand what's your purpose. Is your purpose to, maybe your purpose is to be a be a multimillionaire in X amount of days. Maybe your purpose is to be the head of a company or whatever. What's your purpose? That it's as simple as that. You know, it could be that my purpose is that I want to just be happy to be able to serve. And that is a purpose that maybe that works for me. So that's my personal statement in life. And what is yours? What's your purpose statement in life? What's your mission? And you don't have to come to the end of your days and say, oh, this is my legacy. This is what I'm going to leave behind and things like that. No, but just knowing that I'm living my life with purpose.
No, I think that's great. You know, there was something that, you know, I heard a couple of days ago. It's like, you know, being able to get 1% better than I was yesterday. You know, and it kind of stuck with me. And I was like, oh, that's a really good one. You know, to sort
And
of
that could be your purpose. That's your purpose. And it's as sweet and simple as that just being 1% better than what I was yesterday. And that's about it.
Right. Yeah. You know, you were talking about, you know, having that joy in life and, you know, finding that passion in life at that point in time. Sometimes you're struggling, you know, you don't have a choice but to sort of, you know, lead a life in a certain way. I mean, you know, not many of us have the luxury of shifting and saying that, you know, re-examining our life and saying, okay, I'm going to do something else now because this doesn't give me the joy, or this is, you know, causing me too much of pain, or you know, I'm not liking it at all, you know, right? That luxury many of us don't have. I mean, it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of you know, inner belief for you to make that shift, right? How do you sort of navigate that point when it's really, really difficult, you know, to take that leap of faith?
Yeah. So, Deepa, when we talk about, when we say I don't have the luxury of doing that, it's it's kind of like a lofty statement, because um, it's not about having the luxury. When you're saying that, it's already something that you're saying is unattainable to me. It's not attainable. And it's a luxury, you know, and as we all know, luxury things are something that we aspire to get. But it's not about having the luxury or not having the luxury. It's just about shifting your mindset a little bit to the other side. You know, in terms of, it's not that today I can just drop my job, I can just leave my kids, I can just do whatever I want. It doesn't work that way. We all know that. We generally don't have that space to do that. But when we stop looking at it as it's not a luxury. It's just shifting our thoughts a little bit to the right or the left. You know, I don't want to be in this point. I want to just shift a little bit.
Right. So you're saying everyone has a choice.
Everyone has a choice. It's not about, yes, at this moment in time, it may not be a big choice, but you do have a choice.
Right.
And it's about making that choice, like as in what we just spoke about maybe just a 1% or maybe even a 0.02%. But that's fine. Right. It's fine. You know, that itself is a shift upwards. It's you know, moving the curve from here to there. So it's just about, I'm not surviving, I'm now moving, I'm thriving. I'm moving towards thriving. And that's all the aim is. That can I thrive? And not just every day is a battle, every day is a survival. It doesn't need to be that way.
Yeah. A small shift in your mindset.
Yeah. So it's about giving yourself permission that I can thrive. Even where I am today, I can thrive. So what can I do about it? Given that I'm in this situation, this is my life that I've built for myself. What can I do that I can just thrive?
Right. While talking about this, there is an important topic about setting boundaries, which is so important for growth mindset because it sort of protects your space, time, your mental energy, right? How do you guide women to sort of, set healthy boundaries while staying grounded?
Setting your boundaries, I just want to talk about, I coached a lady a little while ago in life. She was a senior executive in a company, and she had come from a background where everybody in her family came from a business background, and she did not have she was probably the first woman in her family who actually went into a corporate job and built a career for herself into something different away from what her family was doing. And when we coached together, she came to realize that she came from a very patriarchal family where she was never given a seat at the table, in terms of even in the business, family business. She was never asked to take a seat at the table, to make a decision. She was never given an opportunity to even be a part of the business or, even contribute in any way. So she just accepted that fact that it's a patriarchal world and the men in the family are going to run this business. So I need to be doing something else. And so she went out into the corporate world, etc., reached a very senior management role. And then even there, she just believed that I don't need to question this. I can't question it. So when something didn't sit right with her, when she was in a position where she could speak up, she could make some changes, she just didn't. She didn't set those boundaries for herself because she had those beliefs, those certain amount of limited beliefs that she lived with, that I can't set these boundaries.
Mm.
So, I mean, in terms of, and that was like a revelation for her that, yeah, I can actually set boundaries. I can question. I can ask people, why is this happening? I can put forth my ideas. So I don't have to live with these little limiting beliefs that I've structured for myself in my life. So when you need to set boundaries around for things, you need to understand what is stopping you from doing that. What are those little those beliefs and those core things that you've absorbed in your life that does not allow you to set boundaries?
Right.
So if you do want to set boundaries, you first need to understand within yourself what does those boundaries look like.
Yeah.
And that's
So you set it without feeling the carrying the guilt or
Or with
not scared of.
understanding that why
Yeah.
do I need to set these boundaries? Why are they
Right.
important to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And why do I need to change this certain belief in that I have in myself that I have no boundaries?
Yeah.
I know this, I have, a lot of follow-up questions, but I see that, there are a couple of, like we have a few questions from the audience and I know we're coming up on the hours, so I want to make sure that we, get to that. I'm actually looking at, a question here. Loved your thought about having mentors, but a lot of the times, many of you, many know, but we can't read today, clearly. But a lot of times we may know who to reach out to, and we even reach out, but how do you get to,
Get them
how
to
do
invest
you
in us.
get them to, invest in us?
Sorry, I haven't.
Do you see the question in the
Is it
chat?
there on the chat? Yeah, I'm trying to look for
Yeah,
it.
it's the first question
It's
by
in
Priya.
the chat, yeah.
Yeah, okay. But a lot of times we may know who to reach out to, and we even reach out to how do you get them to invest in us? Okay, I think in investing, so women mentors, especially with women, I think we more or less today we understand the value of value of what we have, the knowledge and the experience that we've gained. And I think women are naturally, teachers. They like to sort of nurture someone. And I think it is imperative that um, senior leaders, especially people in the industry who do have the knowledge, understand what is mentorship. And mentorship is always a two-way street, So when you want someone to invest in you, you need to be also forthright enough to be reaching out to them and asking that I need help in XYZ. I need to know more about this. And it's a relationship that you build with someone. It's not something that but I asked the question and she didn't respond to me. She didn't reach out. She didn't come back. Okay, maybe that person isn't your mentor. Maybe you need to look for someone who will want to build a relationship with you. So being a mentor is about building a relationship, and it slowly comes when they would be invested in you if you are invested enough in the relationship yourself. It's not just, that it's a one-off thing that, okay, I learned, I asked my question and now I need to move on. If you want to be in that relationship with a mentor, you need to be understanding that how do I learn from this person? What is of value that person can give me? What's the return on what am I getting? What's that value?
Right.
There's actually another question which came in the Q&A about how do you have confidence to remove like negative impacts from your life?
How do you have confidence for negative impacts?
Impacts from your life.
I'm guessing it's criticism or lashback from people.
So having confidence, in terms of, we all are at some point in time not the most confident person. We're not born confident, so to speak, in terms, yes, there are people who are naturally very confident in life. But I think it's about, like I said, understanding what are your own core values and beliefs. What do you believe in? What gives you confidence? And when you're clear about that, and that is why the importance of evaluating what are your core values and beliefs. Why do I need to be understanding where do I stand in life? What are my values and beliefs? And that gives you confidence because you're really very clear in your mind that I know what I need. I know what's my values. I know what are my beliefs. So I can stand by those values and beliefs, no matter what. So at the bottom line, I know who I am as a person at the core. So that gives me confidence. And of course, you will question. You will obviously have certain doubts in life that, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right step? But like when I said earlier, it's a curve.
Yeah.
And when you're questioning and when you're feeling frustrated and you're feeling underconfident, it means that you are asking you want to learn. You're asking these questions.
Right.
That's great. I know we're, a couple of minutes over, but this was, so good. Just being able to, talk through some of this, hearing sort of, I think some of the tools and the strategies, thank you so much, Cheryl. This, I think for all of us is a moment of, sort of taking that reflection and, like going back and assessing, to see where we individually are, because that, like you said, it is sort of this roller coaster up and down, movement in life, where often you think like you're confident in something and, next thing you know, there's a curveball around the corner and then, it changes everything. So I think for each one of us to be able to tap into like that inner strength it sounds like it's so vital. Again, thank you for everyone who joined today, for being here. Whether you're sort of navigating change or feeling stuck or going through transitions, obviously you being here matters because you've taken that first step to help yourself in that process. And, like I said, maybe we'll all be 1% better than we were yesterday. I feel like that's, headed in the right path. I just want to end this with, a couple of things which are, this is actually our second webinar, and you will get a follow-up email. And we're looking for, it's a survey. So, please feel free to take, the survey, give us feedback. I know we want to make these sessions super powerful. So your feedback really matters. And if you'd like to be a part of, SIRA, then you can join our community on Facebook. It's Flow with SIRA Inner Circle, or you can follow us on Instagram. It's Flow with SIRA. And, our next session is actually going to be focused on financial literacy. It's actually for beginners. It's really financial literacy for beginners. So hope to see you all there. Please invite, a friend, a sister, a colleague, because when we grow together, we flow together. Thank you again. Thank you, Deepa, and thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
It's a
Cheryl.
pleasure
Thank you,
being here.
Rashmi.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for showing up today. Bye.